All right. Welcome to the second ever episode of the Next Man Up podcast. I'm here with my pals Richard and Adam. Say hello, guys.
What's up?
Sup,
That's
sup?
Adam. That's Richard, since they're really bad at introducing themselves. Um, anyway, yeah, as you may know, because you're probably our moms or girlfriends or handful of other friends, because we probably don't have any fans at this point. Just a couple of regular guys who like doing regular guy things, like telling professional athletes how to live their lives, despite having like the collective athletic ability of maybe like an ottoman or like a door or something, inanimate object. But anyway. If you've never heard the pod before, no worries, because we've never heard the podcast before. This is actually our second episode. We did a first one, and I don't even think all of us have listened to it yet. But basically, the premise of Next Man Up is mainly just discuss the three major sports. Notice how I didn't say four major sports. Try to avoid baseball because that's more of a pastime and arguably the most trash sport of all time. I think that's one of the few things all of us are in agreement on. It's also conveniently not baseball season, so don't have to worry about that. But anyway, yeah, we're gonna give this a shot. We're gonna continue to wing intros. Hopefully they work. And if they don't, I guess we'll just cut them out. So you may not even hear this, but hopefully you do. Anyway, let's jump right to it. Rich threw a topic on the board here that I think is pretty interesting. Wanted to give you some time and sort of stall so you could get a handle on the two names you were mixing up. But what are your thoughts on this Andre Drummond trade situation and Draymond Green's comments about it?
Oh man, I have no comments on this. I don't even know what's going on. This is a comment. This is like a topic for you and Adam. That's. I was just
Rich,
gonna wing in
What
with
a
some side
cuck move.
comments.
Why would
there.
you?
Rich,
Why would you recommend a topic you know nothing about? Why would
he
you cuck so hard like that?
he is clearly
Oh
not a Boy
man.
Scout. He did not come prepared whatsoever. Rich,
Imagine typing in a topic in a spreadsheet and then not typing it in Google and just reading about it. That's so bizarre. Like, what the fuck, man?
I think
But
I think
anyway,
Rich's
luckily
comments
we
about
we
this.
can
You
handle
guys
this.
are the NBA guys, man. I just like
I'll
threw
pass it
something
to
up
Adam.
there.
We just talked about trying to get more involved in topics we don't know as much about, and you're like, yeah, definitely. And then I pitched to you, and you have no idea what's going on.
Hey, it's all right. It's all right. We'll work
Anyway,
on
it
it.
is a great topic, though. I will give Rich props for that, and it might spark kind of a broader discussion about just sort of athletes versus owners in sports. But yeah, Adam, what's your take? I assume you've probably been following this at least a little bit.
Yeah, I've definitely read at least what was said, Rich. But yeah, I'm kind of torn on it a little bit. Definitely Drummond, is more of a quiet guy, and Draymond Green is not a quiet guy. So Draymond getting out there and kind of defending Drummond, I like that. I like when players kind of
I
stick
agree.
together and kind of defend each other. I think in general, Drummond just needs to get traded at this point. I think he immediately should be kind of out the door. I don't know why this is
I
taking
agree.
so long.
Yeah.
Um,
I thought
but
the move bringing in Jarrett Allen, who's also a pretty solid center and a little younger, was really a head scratcher for the Cavs, and I'm not surprised that somebody's unhappy, whether it's one of the other centers on the team or Drummond or the coaching staff or the owners or what have you. It just there seems to be a logjam at that position. They definitely got to move somebody. It looks like it's
sure,
going to be Drummond.
yeah, and isn't Tristan Thompson technically playing center this year for them as well? And
Tristan Thompson's in Boston now.
oh, is he?
So yeah, but he was there too. Yeah, the Celtics, they've got Kevin Love who's hurt. They got Larry Nance Jr. They've got a lot of frontline players, and then really just Colin Sexton and Garland as sort of the prominent guards. So a trade could definitely be happening in Cleveland.
I thought that was the whole point of them just not playing him and stuff, was that he was unhappy in the first place. So they
Yeah,
said,
yeah. So basically, from my understanding, is that they're ready to move on from Drummond. They're ready to trade him, and in this load management, God, I hate that so much. Era of basketball, they're obviously not going to play him because he can get hurt, and then he's not worth as much
sure,
on the open market trading wise. So yeah, they're basically just making this guy sit there and not play. And yeah, Draymond Green of the Warriors, kind of I think would maybe someday make a good either VP or president of the Basketball Players Association.
sure,
But anyway, he had some great comments, and I have to say I kind of agree with him. He was basically saying that, earlier this year and in past years, we've had players request trades publicly, and there's been a lot of backlash for that. There's been, media and fans and whoever else taking shots at those players for not being loyal or for not handling that professionally. And the media really gets a hold of that and absolutely crucifies those guys. But I don't know about you, Adam, and clearly not Rich because he doesn't do his job. But I honestly had no idea that Drummond was even on the trade block, and I'm a pretty avid basketball fan. So I think Draymond has a point in that sense that, like, if James Harden requests a trade or Anthony Davis a few years ago, not only is it front page news that we probably run into the ground in sports media on, ESPN or TNT or wherever else, but we don't hear about it at all. Like, if Draymond hadn't said anything, I don't know that we'd even know that Drummond requested a trade. They kind of just have, let him just kind of fester on the sidelines and not play, which is sort of a bizarre move. I mean, if a player chooses to sit out on the sidelines and pout because they want to be traded, they get crucified. But if the owner decides to pull a guy that they want to trade out, publicly tell everyone that he's on the trading block and then just make him sit there, like, that is kind of a double standard. I can kind of see where Draymond's coming from.
Sure, definitely. I didn't actually know anything was going on with Drummond until actually fantasy basketball put it out there that Drummond would not be playing anymore until further notice. And I looked into it saying, okay, is he hurt? Is he sick? With the COVID thing going on.
Right.
And then I just read at the time, there was really no information even out there yet, just saying the Cavs have decided not to play him until they could move him. And like you said, I didn't realize that he even wanted to be moved, or if that was,
Right. He might not want to be. I honestly don't know. Like, that's the funny thing is that, like I was sort of saying, and I think you were too, like, if you look at this from the opposite perspective and some of the ongoing trade sagas we've had in the past, it's usually the player requesting the trade, and there's pressure from fans that, they need to suit up and play. But then when James Harden did that earlier this year, people were upset. Fantasy owners and what have you were upset that he wasn't putting up the same numbers. He came into training camp a little out of shape, whatever else. But then when they choose to sit, like in the case of Anthony Davis in his, final season with the Pelicans, people aren't happy with that either. But for some reason, the owners can force a player to sit, and no one's really outraged by that until Draymond brought it to our attention.
And I think definitely depending on the reasons in which they're not playing, that could really hurt their value. If a player is not playing because of their choosing, another team might reflect poorly on that and say, this guy, might not do the same thing to us. They might
Right.
decide that they don't want to play one day, and that could hurt their value. And in a situation like this, where it's the team's choice not to be playing him, I don't really know if that's going to affect his value much, other than teams might fear that he's not going to stay ready or something like that. But, for a professional athlete, I kind of doubt that'll happen for someone that's, not very old, I guess, in general.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know. It's sort of a bizarre move. Kind of sparks a much bigger topic that I think we also have on the board here today. I hope we can rope Rich in. I think he's still licking his wounds because we were making fun of him for not knowing anything about this topic that he
Man,
suggested.
whatever.
But athletes versus owners. Obviously, I think we touched on it a little bit. Most of the major sports have a players association, lockouts, trade disputes, free agency arguments. There's been tons of stuff over the years. There's probably an entire Wikipedia page on, players versus owners in terms of labor talks and stuff. But it kind of invites the conversation. Where do you guys tend to side in these disagreements? Do you kind of empathize with the owners and the daunting task that is managing a lot of these athletes who are pretty well paid, or do you look from the athlete's perspective and say, they get kind of crucified, I guess, in some senses for complaining because they're millionaires, but the people they're complaining about are billionaires. So I don't know, you can kind of look at it from two angles. What do you think, Rich?
Well, with this, it's a little bit more of a double-edged sword. Like, it's super annoying with, like, Draymond. Like, his situation is annoying because just like you guys brought up before, that if a player sits, they get fined, they get crucified for sitting to demand a trade, but then the owners don't get fined or anything if they decide,
Right.
oh,
It's
I'm going
true.
to bench this guy because I don't want to lose trade value, even though he's healthy and we're still paying him. So it's like, where's the fine for the owner for not putting your best product out onto the field or onto the court or onto the
True.
ice
Yeah. They're a better
or
team
whatever
with
it
Drummond on the
is?
court. Yep.
Because now you're taking that away from the people that pay money to see these individuals play all the time. So why are the owners not getting fined for purposely benching players, not putting the best product out onto the court,
Yep.
ice,
I agree.
fields, and things like that? That's what's super like annoying to me, and that's where I feel like there is a double standard there where there's all this pressure on the athletes to win, to work hard, to do all this stuff, and the owner's responsibility is like, okay, so we got to pay you and we have to deal with marketing and like how are we going to get revenue to keep paying you, but I still need to collect mine kind of deal. So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of
You bring up the fines, and that's really funny because I don't know if you guys remember this, but I think it was right when LeBron, yeah, it was during the Anthony Davis trade. So the funny thing is, they fined Magic Johnson for his close relationship with the players, being a former player, and trying to sort of they got him on a tampering fine when he was
Sure.
working for the Lakers front office. Poor guy ended up stepping down because they absolutely crucified and grilled this guy, saying that he was, you know facilitating an Anthony Davis trade or trades for whoever else. This guy publicly steps down. It's kind of awkward and embarrassing. He's got close ties with the Laker organization, having played there as a player and stuff. And he looked like he was like borderline in tears the day he stepped down, and was really sad and disheartened. And then they turn around and they trade for Anthony Davis anyway. So, without him being there. So it's like, what really is tampering anymore? Because you look at something like this, and to me, this is tampering. If you're benching Andre Drummond, who's easily the best player on the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are actually, I believe, still sort of in the playoff picture right now. If you're benching this guy, that is tampering because you're tanking. And if you're deliberately tanking, if I'm not mistaken, you should be fined for that. And if that's not a rule, it definitely should be, because there's nothing more trash, I think we can all agree on this, than when a team deliberately tanks. And the Cavs have looked really good. They've beat some great teams. I think they beat the Brooklyn Nets twice. If I'm not mistaken, they had a couple good showings against the Lakers. They've played some of the elite teams in the league pretty tough. Colin Sexton's really improved this year. Andre Drummond's looked great. Their length and size in the front court with Drummond and others has been really good. But, to bench Drummond and basically say publicly this dude's on the trade block, I mean, that's completely absurd. Like, I can't agree with that at all. I'm really glad Draymond spoke up. I know he's kind of a hated player by many in the league, but I like when he says this kind of stuff. Drummond obviously didn't seem like he was going to stick up for himself for fear of it hurting his trade value. So I'm really glad Draymond stepped in and said something.
I definitely think that the Cavs have been kind of going downhill since this whole move, because they definitely got off to a kind of a hot start
Yeah, they were playing
early in
good.
the year. And I think at one point, I want to say they were like fourth or fifth in the East. And now they're not even technically, if the season ended today, which obviously we still have a lot more of the season to go. I think if it ended today, they wouldn't be in it at all. And I think they've lost like 4 of their
Yeah,
last
yeah,
5
you're
or
right. They've
something like
lost
that.
8 games in a row.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay, wow. Okay, I've not been following them as closely, but
sure.
you can draw a direct correlation to this trade scandal to them trying to tank. I mean, geez, you're right. I thought they still were in the playoff picture, but they've completely fallen out of it,
Hmm.
pretty much entirely due to this Drummond benching. Has killed the chemistry. It's probably distracted everybody involved, and now you've got this team down at the bottom of the standings that is basically going to start scouting and looking for who they're going to pick in the lottery, because it looks like they've just completely adjusted the course of their season. their team was out there ready to compete, looking fully capable of making the playoffs, and they didn't like that. So they benched their best player, threatened to trade him publicly, embarrassing him, and his family. And now they're falling to the bottom of the standings, and they're going to benefit for that come lottery time. I mean, that's excuse my language, but that's fucked up.
Yeah, I'm not sure in any sports if there's a technical penalty for tanking. I don't know if I've ever heard of that. And I've looked more so at football and through their rules and stuff. I don't think I've ever read that there's a penalty for deliberately tanking. Now, if I think back to this last football season, and I think back to the last game of the season where the
Eagles.
the Eagles were winning that game. They had just pulled Carson Wentz a couple weeks earlier, and Jalen Hurts was winning games. They were up in that game, and then come the second half, they just pull him out of the game, and fans were irate. That was one of the clearest tanking moves that I've ever seen in sports, and people were demanding that they had draft picks pulled from them and all kinds of stuff. And then it ended up turning out that the league said, well, we can't prove that they were tanking. And the coaching staff came out and said, well, essentially we were trying to see where, because they weren't going to make the playoffs. They were saying, well, we'll see where we were going next year. And we wanted to see what Nate Sudfeld had, in his tank.
Bullshit.
Yeah, right.
And I straight up don't believe that. You just pull
That's
the quarterback.
Third string quarterback at the time.
Right.
Yeah, that's
you
absurd.
just pull your quarterback. You're playing a guy, an early round draft pick, and you want to see what your third guy has, a guy that's going to be a free agent, but like they have an early draft pick again this year. If they really aren't sure of Jalen Hurts, then they could easily pick another quarterback this year. You don't have to see what your third guy on the roster has.
That's a cop-out.
But once again, the league comes back and says, we can't prove that they're tanking. So I don't know what the proof is in tanking. I mean, that was as clear as tanking could be until something like this happens with the Cleveland Cavaliers. As you were saying, like earlier in the year, they were, I think, in the top 5. And then now, 8 games in a row they've lost, and now they're looking at maybe a lottery pick, and is that the reason why they're not playing a guy like Andre Drummond?
Right. And I guess you're right. I'm looking at, some articles here, but I was listening to you, I promise. But yeah, the NBA modified their NBA draft lottery odds, to account for tanking, but all they really did was, a lot of people aren't really too thrilled with it, because all they really did was they take the top 3 picks, or the top 3 lottery chances, the 3 worst teams in the league, and they give them equal shot at a number 1 pick. So that's supposed to incentivize you to not tank as hard, but it's like, okay, you're still going to tank to the bottom 3. It just makes it less work to tank to the bottom. So it helps a little, I guess, but it's like, yeah, I don't know.
But you could still tank into the bottom 3 and then say, okay, we're done tanking. And that almost gives people more of an excuse to not make it look like you're tanking as hard. Because now you're tanking and then you kind of like let up. Okay, maybe we'll win a couple games here. Right. And then, maybe it doesn't look as bad. Oh, look, we ended up we weren't the worst team, but we're in the bottom 3. So we still have an equal chance at getting that top pick.
Right. And it hurts the teams that are truly bad. You look at a team like the Detroit Pistons, and you can tell that team, as constructed, is playing hard. They're trying to win games, like in a lot of cases. Whether that's the case later on in the season, I won't be able to blame them. I mean, they wouldn't be the first team to tank if they choose to go that route later in the season. But I mean, they've taken the Lakers to overtime. They've beaten the Celtics.
They beat the Nets.
They beat the Nets
after Harden coming there.
Right. So I mean, that's a team that you look at and you go, that's the right way to get a draft pick in basketball, to play hard, to maybe lose games by a close margin, but to be competitive, to put a good product on the floor, as Rich said, and to watch exciting basketball. I mean, that's a young team. They got a guy in Jeremy Grant who's gone from being, a role player on the Denver Nuggets to being their star. It's reasonable to expect that team really is trying and that they're tanking. And you're going to sit here and say that, like, that team gets an equal shot at the number 1 pick, and they could actually use it and are actually handling.
He could win most improved player.
I think he could. Yeah, I really think he could. He's my vote, definitely. Christian Wood, you could maybe also throw in there. But yeah, you can't sit there with a straight face and tell me that situation is the same as what's going on in Cleveland right now, and those teams are equally deserving of an equal shot at the number one
Right.
pick. There's no chance in hell that that's the case, in my
I
opinion.
mean, I totally agree. You know, when it's the owner's decision to do this stuff like tanking or benching guys out of nowhere, that, you know, that's not right. They should be fine. I think the hope there is when they're doing stuff like this, benching players, that fans will notice that and fans will stop showing up. In this in this age, it's weird because fans are already not there, so you can't see
Yeah,
the power of the
exactly.
fan not showing up or
Right.
not buying merchandise, because I think it's weird with the COVID stuff going on. You don't really see those effects at this point, but I think
Yeah,
that is the
especially not with
hope.
a small market team like Cleveland. Now that
Sure.
LeBron's no longer there, they're not always in our radar. I think, once in a while, like, when they were beating down the Nets and stuff and playing good basketball, they were kind of on our radar. But then, yeah, even someone like you and I who, are pretty big basketball fans, we blink and they've lost 8 in a row. They're at the bottom of the standings, and you find out that their best player hasn't even been playing. Like,
Right.
it's far too easy to kind of make one or two decisions that can completely cause your team to
Right.
plummet to the bottom of the standings. And it's
No.
sad to see, because when you look at the rest of the standings, the East is wide open. We were talking about it in our last
Right.
podcast that a lot of below 500 teams are going to make the playoffs. So you look at a team like Cleveland that's got some promising pieces. This could have been a year where those guys got to compete for the playoffs, but their ownership decided that they wanted to bench Drummond. And if I'm
Yeah.
Colin Sexton and other guys on that team, I'm absolutely livid, because now
Yeah.
I got to be down in the doldrums again when I did my job and played hard and
I'm
elevated the team.
I'm sure in some aspect though, the ownership is thinking, why get an 8th seed or 7th seed if we're going to lose first round of the playoffs, like stuff like
Right.
that, because that
Right.
does hurt their draft stock. And that is kind of the definition of tanking. Why make the playoffs if that's just going to hurt, our draft positioning? Why not just lose more games and get a better
Right.
draft positioning?
It's
So
true. It's sad to see. I don't know what you do about it other than one of the guys I'd love to get on the podcast is sort of our next man up guest is one of my friends who's a big soccer fan. His name's Garrison. But he was telling me that what soccer does is they relegate teams. So to keep teams from tanking, they bump them down to a lower league. So in basketball, the G League is kind of the minor leagues of basketball, but it would be pretty funny if, you got caught tanking where you were really, really particularly terrible. If you had to play, double A basketball, for lack of a better word, and kind of win that, you know, minor league championship in order to kind of get out of that league and get back into competing,
and would
because
those teams
otherwise.
just stay in that league and win 10 straight? And
Right.
hey, at least we're winning
Yeah,
somewhere.
but I think like you were saying, the financial ramifications of playing in that smaller league, would certainly hurt. I don't know many basketball fans that watch the G League, even the hardcore ones.
Sure.
So yeah, it would
I
certainly
mean,
hurt their revenue
so
being
in this
classified as an
circumstance
amateur team, basically.
that's going out with Drummond, I think the ownership is not good. I don't like what they're doing there. In some aspects, sometimes I think the owner makes those decisions for the good of the team. When you have a player that isn't playing just because there's some other thing going on, or they're just unhappy with, a draft pick or something, and they just choose not to play, that hurts the team as well. And that has nothing to do with the owner. So I think that is the owner's right then to say, if you don't want to play for me, then you're going to get out of here, or I'm not going to put you in the game. So I think there are certain times that the owner makes those decisions thinking about the team and thinking about how a player that's on his team is kind of letting the rest of the team down for another reason.
I mean, with you bringing that up, that's like kind of like Harden at the beginning of the year, since we're talking about athletes versus owners. Like, owner wise for Drummond, that's solely on the owners. You're benching your best player that's healthy to trade him, which again, now you have a higher chance of tanking to get that better pick. Where like Harden and Houston gave Harden everything. They gave him control. They gave him
Yeah, it's
huge
true.
amounts of money when trades and stuff were
Secondary
going
playmakers.
through. Yeah, exactly. Like they put pieces around him, not only that made sense for the team, but that like Harden wanted there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
then after all that, now all the players that he wanted to play for either didn't mesh well with him or for whatever reason it just didn't work. And now he's going to go cry wolf and be like, well, Houston put me in a bad spot. No, bro, you put yourself in a bad spot. You have a contract. You need to fulfill that. Like, that's more on him than the owners itself because the owners try to do everything for
Right.
you and you took advantage of that.
Yeah, I definitely
I
agree with
agree.
that.
There's,
Yeah.
I definitely are on the same side as Rich where, you look back at, I'm kind of a basketball historian. You look back at Oscar Robertson, who I think was the first president of the Players Association when the NBA was first getting popular. I think back in the 60s, even into the 60s, free agency wasn't a thing. So I think you can find articles, and if I'm not mistaken, Oscar Robertson was the president of the Players Association at the time when there was no such thing as free agency. Players had little to no rights at all, and he fought really hard, to get them those rights and stuff. But you flash forward to the 2020s, and there's players changing teams left and right. Jerseys, companies are airing commercials where you can get jersey assurance because players are bouncing around so frequently. You can get a refund on your jersey if your favorite player on your team changes teams. We've full 180'd, I think, to Rich's point in some respects, and it's become a very player-driven league. I think the NBA deserves a lot of credit. I won't get too political, but for the way they handled, the COVID situation and the election and voter suppression and things of that nature, and kind of letting the players speak their minds in regards to police brutality and some of the voting initiatives they had started in local cities and stuff like that. So they do a great job of letting the players speak their mind in that sense. But Rich is right. There are definitely some situations like in Houston, it's totally toxic where you have somebody who's running the organization, or as great as a player like LeBron James is, there's a joke that he goes places and makes them better. I don't know that he makes them better with the players that are actually there. I think he just has enough leeway and he has the right connections, whether it be getting his buddies to sign with his buddy Rich Paul, I believe is his name, who's his agent, getting guys under the same agency, umbrella, so to speak, and then able to kind of negotiate trades and free agency deals and stuff in order to get a better team. I mean, stuff like that is a bit crazy, which I guess would be maybe a nice segue into our next topic, which is that the owners maybe don't have enough pull. If we kind of take a look at the NBA All Stars selected, the starters were released today, and I think Adam definitely disagrees with this list he was saying before he started today. But the one I think I disagree with maybe is Luka Doncic being a starter over Damian Lillard, and it coming down to a tiebreaker. It was actually picked by the fans, so the fans were sort of the deciding break because Luka and Damian were 2 and 3 in the player rank, where the other players in the league kind of vote who they think should be all stars, and the media rank. Um, so it's kind of interesting to me that the fans were able to decide that vote when what I kind of like is the owners who watch these guys every day, kind of getting a say over who really are the most valuable and most deserving players in the league of making the All-Star game. So that might be an instance, to Rich's point, where the owners don't have enough say. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think, like I was saying before, I think in certain situations they pull their power too much. That's for sure.
Right.
We've seen that plenty of times. In other situations, they don't have enough power, So I think that's part of the problem with why they, strong arm people sometimes is they figure that there's going to be times that they're not going to be, having enough to say or something like that. But as far as bringing up the All-Star game, yeah, I think it's hard for me to say that the owners should decide, more about who makes the All-Star game. I think it's hard to say who should pick, for an All-Star game. But I feel like a lot of times it does come down to some sort of popularity contest, and it doesn't always come down to who's actually a better player or who's playing better that season. You bring up Luka, definitely a good player. He makes an argument for being in there, but Lillard, he always manages to hit big shots in big moments. He does it
Absolutely,
almost just as good as anybody else out there, definitely, in terms of Steph Curry and guys like that, I think he's definitely there with them. The person that I have the biggest problem with, actually two people come from the East, definitely the guards, Bradley Beal and Kyrie Irving. I don't think, and again, not saying either one of them isn't a great player and could be there, but I disagree with them both being starters for the All-Star game. Bradley Beal, yes, he's leading the league in scoring, but Zach LaVine is putting up better numbers than him in almost every category other than scoring. Zach LaVine has more rebounds per game, more assists per game, more made threes per game, more steals per game, more blocks per game. He's a better on-ball defender, and his shooting percentage is over 50%, while Beal is only shooting at 48%. So Beal, he's putting up numbers in the scoring department, but he's taking so many shots. He's always on the floor. He's not a terrible defender, but I think Zach LaVine is a better defender. And Zach is beating him in almost every single category other than points. So which player is better to you?
I mean, I agree, but I only partially agree. I wouldn't use maybe Zach LaVine to make the argument because I think him and Bradley Beal have a lot more in common than, they have differences in
Sure,
terms of
yeah.
their
No,
value as players.
I definitely think they have a lot in common.
Yeah.
I think they're very comparable players, and that's why I can
And
make
their
the
situations are
comparison.
comparable too. I
Right.
mean, the Bulls, we don't know just yet. Like we were saying, the East is pretty open, but the Bulls the past couple of years, it's hurt Levine, and we talked about this in our first podcast because the team, is not good enough. But in our last pod, we sat and we sort of talked about why
LaVine
guys
has
like
more wins too, by the way, this season.
right.
So if it's about wins too, he's got him there as well.
Right, but I would even say there's guys that deserve it over both of them. I mean, you look at a guy like James Harden, who has been the one that's had to sacrifice in Brooklyn. I know it seems absurd and unfair to have three starting all-stars all from the same team, but I believe it's probably happened before with maybe the Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen Celtics or something. I can't think of a specific instance, but when there's three players that good on the same team, just for the sake of parity, doesn't mean you get to put a guy who's at the bottom of the league standings wise, who puts up a lot of points but doesn't do anything else over a guy like James Harden, who's clearly also led the league in scoring but has taken on the role of point guard and facilitator and done a great job of getting his superstar teammates involved and helping them get their numbers and keeping them happy. That's not an easy job either, and I am utterly stunned that, like you said, that Kyrie Irving first off would be picked ahead of James Harden when James Harden has been the only guy out there in a couple of the games, to my knowledge, since arriving in Brooklyn. He played the other night by himself on the second night of a back-to-back and led the team to a huge comeback against the Suns. I think they were down like 21 points at halftime, and he led them back single-handedly, short-handed, while both Durant and Kyrie sat out. So for a guy like James Harden to not be a starter in the All-Star game, but someone like Bradley Beal, who not only is playing on a bad team and gets a ton of shots and doesn't have to share the spotlight at all, but also, like you said, doesn't really have the wins to translate to being a starter. I was under the impression that, it might be possible that Bradley Beal doesn't make the All-Star game at all. For him to make it as a starter, I think sort of shows a flaw in the voting process, which is just, I get the sense that Washington Wizards Twitter and, the media and what have you urge the fans to get out and vote because they're having a terrible season. So they rallied around Bradley Beal as sort of a marketing ploy to distract the fans from the fact that the team's absolutely terrible, and as maybe a last-ditch effort to keep that guy there and from requesting a trade by maybe trying to get him rewarded with an all-star starting slot that he does not deserve, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's his first one, so obviously that's going to be kind of big for him. But
Right.
I think I don't think he
was
deserves it.
if he was selected by, I believe the assistant coaches are the ones who pick the bench. If he made it in at the bench, I'd be like, hey, I don't agree with that, but I get it. But I
Hmm.
completely don't agree with him being a starter. I'm
Sure.
sorry to cut you off, but I just had to get that last thing.
No, definitely. Like I said, I disagree with both those guys, Bradley Beal and Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving voluntarily sat like what,
True.
8 games already
True.
this year.
That's a great point.
So whether it's rest or him just being him, he's voluntarily sat out a third of the games
Right.
this season.
Exactly.
How is he
And
a
voluntarily sit out games that count in the standings,
right?
but he's going to play the All-Star game in the
Right.
midst of a pandemic. He's going to play a meaningless game as a starter, but he can't even show up and play the second night of a back-to-back or that entire stretch where he sat out and just said he didn't want to play in games that matter. And this guy's going to ride the coattails of Harden and Kevin Durant to possibly a finals appearance this year and get rewarded being an all-star starter. Yeah, I mean, I think it's time to adjust that voting process. I don't know if you recall back in the day, but there was a period where Yao Ming was getting voted over Shaquille O'Neal as a starter in the all-star game almost every year, despite Shaq being a better player. And Yao was great too. He's a Hall of Famer as well. But yeah, the overseas fans voted in Yao overwhelmingly. I think sometimes you'll see crazy campaigns for guys like Alex Caruso or Brian Scalabrine to get voted in the All-Star game, and sometimes it actually gets dangerously close to
Oh my
happening. So,
gosh.
yeah, they've tried to amend that process numerous times over the years, and I still don't think they've quite figured it out.
Well, with Kyrie Irving, real quick, like with him, missing games and stuff
Right.
because of his whatever's going on with him in general, him not being a starter or being part of the All Star game, would that cost that team or the NBA more time of not having Irving out on the court?
But it's like parenting a child, I'd imagine. If that were the case, I mean, you can't let him, strong arm you into an all-star appearance to get him to show up and do his job. Like you were mentioning, he's under contract, and that's, back to our owners versus players argument. That's something where, I'd have to sign with the owners. This dude's under contract, and if you've got a campaign for him to be an all-star starter to get him out on the floor and actually playing as an owner, if you've got to, tell your social media team to, hey, start a campaign on the internet voting for Kyrie to get voted into the All-Star game. Maybe you don't mention Harden as much because we can't afford for Harden to get in and not Kyrie, because then Kyrie will lose interest. That's screwed up. That's wrong. That's just, in my opinion, that's not morally sound. It's bad for basketball. It's bad for sports, which kind of leads me into my next point. What's the Pro Bowl selection process like? Is it any better? Are there any sports that are doing it better? I don't know what hockey's situation is these days or baseball's, but how are these all stars picked? I know we always sort of circle back to that. It's a
It's
popular topic.
always like fan base and then when you get to the tail end, it's like, oh, coaches or like owners or whatever it is get kind of like final say for the last like couple players like on a roster
Yeah, that's
kind of
annoying.
deal. Or I think with the Pro Bowl, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong. With the Pro Bowl, it's fan based. Then once there's an injury, then it's the coaches
I
that
think the
decide
NBA
who's
does a similar
replaced.
thing. Yeah.
I think last I checked, which it's been a while since I've cared anything about the Pro
Yeah.
Bowl.
Yeah, Pro Bowl
Uh,
sucks anyways
but
because they moved it
last I
from
checked,
Hawaii, idiots.
was the fan vote counts for a certain percentage. It's like if two players are close, the fan vote. But I do think there's some sort of panel of coaches, assistant coaches, former players that has more of a say of who makes the Pro Bowl. But because the
Okay.
fans get, I don't know if it's 25% or something of the vote or something like that, it always comes down to a popularity contest anyway. Stats go out the window, actual play goes out the window, and
That's
it comes down to just who's popular at the time and who's marketable. There's
yeah,
always that
exactly.
argument too, is like,
Exactly.
the league is still a business, so they're going to put a player out there that's going to draw more attention to the league itself. And I think that happens in all sports.
Yeah, definitely.
Now,
True, true.
talking about now Hall of Fame, it's a little bit different. I believe there's like a Hall of Fame panel that selects, and I think, again, that's mostly ex-players, ex-coaches, stuff like that, that's on a panel that casts their vote. I don't think the fans have anything to do with Hall of Fame votes in any sports. And Austin, I'm not sure about basketball Hall of Fame, but I believe that's how it is in football.
I think, yeah, most Hall of Fames kind of operate like a Grammys or an Oscars. There's sort of a committee maybe made up of past Hall of Famers that make those picks. And, luckily it's usually really obvious. I can't think of many Hall of Fame snubs in basketball as of late. The guys who are first ballot Hall of Famers are first ballot Hall of Famers. You know, for instance, Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, probably going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. It
I would imagine.
won't be very difficult. I think they might have already officially selected
I
him.
believe
But
before
yeah, the
even
last first ballot Hall of Famers that became eligible were, I think, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, and Kobe Bryant. They were all
Mhm.
first ballot Hall of Famers. No one had a problem with it because they're all incredibly deserving, former champions, multiple time All Stars, MVPs, guys that it is a no brainer that they're Hall of Famers. We've known it since probably the middle of their respective careers, and they're in. So, yeah, I haven't really seen it fail in the Basketball Hall of Fame in recent memory. I think the only guy that I think has maybe been snubbed a little bit is Chris Webber, analyst on TNT now. He played for the Kings, was an All-Star for a few years. I don't think he's in yet, which is a bit baffling to me because some other guys with similar careers that don't involve championships or MVPs have made it in. Allen Iverson, who's a bit more marketable, to your point, Adam and Rich, got in a couple years ago, which was great to see. But yeah, that's really the only guy I can think of in basketball that's probably should be in the Hall of Fame but hasn't gotten in.
Michael Jordan's in there, right? Though.
Absolutely, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
You haven't
Yeah.
seen that crying Jordan meme from a
No,
few years ago?
not at
That's
all.
from the Hall of Fame speech.
I'm just kidding. Of course. Of course Michael Jordan would be in there. That'd be like saying LeBron's not
Well,
gonna
but
be
it
in there.
is weird though because it's like the media doesn't help do us any favors, but they basically, we talk about Hall of Famers before they're technically in the Hall of Fame. Like people probably say if they're doing it correctly, LeBron James future Hall of Famer, but I know I find myself just saying LeBron's a Hall of Famer, like current tense, like he is because he should be. I don't know that
Yeah,
there should be a delay at
right.
all. I think you should be able to be inducted like literally the second you retire.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm not sure
why do we even waste our
is
time with someone
that
that good?
waiting
But
period in case they come back or something
I
in the league?
think
Is
I think
that
that is what it's designed for.
yeah.
And Michael Jordan, ironically, is a great example because that's a guy who retired in '93, but obviously at age 30, people were pretty confident he might come back, and he ended up doing that,
Right.
winning three
Well,
more
I
championships.
think with certain players, it's like more obvious that they are not going to come back than some
Right.
players. They're definitely not going to. But I don't know. It's hard to put that into a rule of some sort. Like as long as it's guaranteed this player doesn't come back, then they can be voted in right away. And then if there's a chance they come back, they'll have to wait. Like I think that's probably the
Or
issue
maybe an
behind it.
age restriction. Like if Tom Brady retires, he's in his 40s. He's probably not coming back. So I
I don't
think
know, man. He
put him
could come back.
out.
Gronk did it, and I mean
um,
he's way younger,
but
but
the age thing is a funny segue. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. The guy you guys kind of wanted to talk about in terms of the NFL Hall of Fame was Rich. I think you had a particular wide receiver in mind that you weren't thrilled
Oh,
with
okay.
the
So I want to
entirety of.
start off with the NFL Hall of Fame because the NFL Hall of Fame, it's normally a panel of media individuals that are vote on the Hall of Fame because they've been writing about the sport, whatever, whatever. I don't know the criteria, but the majority of it is media individuals that
Oh,
vote for the NFL Hall of Fame.
it's
So
not a committee of former Hall of Famers
with it,
or
no, there
coaches.
are
Oh,
some, but the
oh,
majority is
that's
media
screwed up. But
individuals.
oh
So that's what's super annoying with the NFL Hall of Fame because just like you brought up, Calvin Johnson, huge fan, love Calvin Johnson. I believe he should be in the Hall of Fame for sure, but a first ballot Hall of Fame with retiring early, not putting up as good numbers as some other receivers that are in the Hall of Fame because he decided to retire early makes no sense to me. So because he got along better with the media, he gets a first ballot Hall of Fame where you have somebody as TO where he is number 2 or 3 in every single wide receiver category there is had to wait 2-3 years because he ragged on the media, talked crap about the media. So the media was like, oh, well, you're not a first ballot Hall of Famer, even though he put up the numbers and everything. There is no excuse for him not being a first ballot Hall of Famer besides the media just saying, like,
That's so
no,
funny.
you were a dick to me, so
That's
yeah,
so punk
fuck you.
rock, man. It reminds me of that
It's
line in
so
School of
annoying.
Rock. That's so punk rock, man. It reminds me of that line in School of Rock where like one of the kids just goes, "Come on, man, the Sex Pistols never won anything." It's so true, man. Like there are definitely these guys like Marshawn Lynch or Draymond Green for speaking up. That's a guy whose stats don't jump off the page, who the media maybe doesn't like because he holds them accountable, but a guy that I think belongs in the Hall of Fame. And you know, you look across all the major sports, there's always those guys or girls, depending on the sport, that speak their minds, and if that hurts their Hall of Fame case, you know, I don't think much should keep you out of the Hall of Fame other than, you know, maybe like Pete Rose's scandal, which I'm sure we could argue about in baseball, or, you know, steroid use, or, you know, whatever else that would disqualify you. Wow, baseball has a lot of Hall of Fame issues now that I think about it.
I
But,
think
you know,
baseball has
if
a lot
it's
of
not something
issues in
totally
general.
absurd like that, it's just petty, you know, to keep someone off the, you know, list of first ballot Hall of Famers or out of the Hall of Fame in general, just because, you know, they've spoken out to the media. Like that's total garbage. And to Rich's point also, you know, yeah, I wish we had Josh on the pod. It's pretty funny that, you know, there's been a couple Lions to retire early. I guess that franchise and team is just so unbearable that like guys got to jump out of there in the middle of their prime and just say, you know what, I'm done. This has made me hate football. I'm done.
Yeah.
But like, it is funny that, you know, I guess you could argue the Hall of Fame would need to be expanded if everybody could retire at what was, you know, Megatron, like what, like 31,
I think
32?
he was like 29 or
Yeah, he was
30.
Yeah,
29
if
or 30.
anybody,
I
if
Like,
don't even think he
most
hit 30 before
all-star,
retiring.
yeah, if most all-star players or Pro Bowl players retired in their prime, they would have a much better case for being in the Hall of Fame. So yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. Like, so longevity should buy you a faster seat to the Hall of Fame, in my opinion.
Definitely.
Plus, wouldn't the eligibility not align because yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe that's some of it.
I think
But
that's why he had to
he's
wait so
eligible
long, right?
sooner because he retired sooner. I don't know.
no, it's just like, I believe it's like you have to not be playing in the league for like, what is it, like 4 or 5 years or something like
Something
that to
like
be
that, yeah.
like
How long has T.O.
eligible
been out of the
for it.
league now? Like
So
just
like
as long as Calvin.
it
T.O.
was,
stopped playing in like 2010. It's been like
Yeah.
10 years.
And Calvin
yeah,
maybe what, a handful of years after that, if that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Not long
just so
actually.
annoying because I feel like the Hall of Fame should be more like number based.
Hmm.
What did you do on the field? Were
Right.
you like an actual game changer? Where Calvin Johnson, he was a game changer. Like
Right.
everything was shifted to him. He was getting double, triple covered, and he's still putting up those stats, still putting up those numbers. T.O., same thing. In T.O.'s prime, he was getting double, triple covered, and he's still putting up numbers.
Right.
Like the other thing you could say too is T.O. did it with multiple quarterbacks,
Hmm.
where
Right.
Calvin Johnson had Matthew Stafford his entire career as well, except for maybe I think the first year or two.
Yeah, I
He
can't
might
remember
not
who
have
got
had
drafted first. But
Stafford,
you're right. That pairing
but
has been pretty much
like yeah, that
pretty
definitely
good.
helps when your quarterback could actually like throw the ball down the field and have some talent. Where like T.O. has played with what is it, like a Jeff Garcia? Who else like other like kind of not so good quarterbacks has T.O. played with?
Donovan
Ever.
McNabb.
Oh, dude, I love McNabb. You can't,
Donovan McNabb
dude, you
was
can't
good,
rag on
man. He was
McNabb. Get out of
backyard
here.
football. That's my
They
I
guy.
just,
just I just
ah,
want to I just want
get
to
out of
throw
here,
that out
man.
there to see you
That
guys
was,
get pissed off.
jeez, man.
Dude,
The heck?
I'm
bitch
just I'm
move.
still salty because I wanted to
Even
see
I know
McNabb
Donovan
come to
McNabb.
Chicago. They teased us with that so long, like
Oh,
McNabb's coming to
What
Chicago, and
what
then he
is
just
with the
never did.
Eagles Bears
yeah.
quarterback swap? narrative. Why?
Dude, they
Why the hell
teased
is
that
that
for, I don't
even a
know,
training
5 years, and then McNabb was like 40, and he's like, I'm gonna come out of retirement. I'll only play for the Bears. And I was like, all right, it's too late, bro. Like you're
Yeah.
done. We don't want you
It's a
anymore.
pretty funny joke from him, though. Honestly, means he noticed it too and was annoyed by it.
Yeah,
But,
but no, yeah, you're right. I
speaking of
think
quarterbacks, though, oh, so I'm sorry. Do you have more to say on the Hall of
yeah,
Fame?
I was just gonna say, I think if your argument is that T.O. should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer, I think 99% of anyone who watched T.O. play football would say, of course he should have been. And he was just an asshole. And like, yeah, I don't think it should be a popularity contest. And I think because he was an asshole, people put him down for it. But that has nothing to do with how great he was on the field. Now, if your argument is Megatron shouldn't have been a first ballot Hall of Famer, I think a lot of people would disagree with you. Only because, again, yeah, longevity I think should have a lot to do with being in the Hall of Fame. But if you just look at what that guy was able to do on the field, his skill set and what he was able to do, and again, I've never been a huge Matthew Stafford fan. I don't think he's that good. I don't think he's that bad. And what he was able to do with Matthew Stafford, he was a fantastic wide receiver, and I think he probably does. He definitely deserves to be there. First ballot, you can argue either way, but yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, that's a funny point too that you brought up. You mentioned that the media doesn't like To, but I'm thinking back to it as just a casual fan. There's some sound bites and hilarious things that To have said, or someone like Marshawn Lynch also comes to mind, where they allegedly hate the media and have a bad relationship with the media, but they've been more popular in the media because of their disdain for the media, that it's actually helped these people's careers.
Right.
So like for them to turn around and snub these guys, it's like, dude, the best thing that could have possibly happened to you as a career is being the journalist that asked Marshawn Lynch a stupid question and he responds, I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Right.
Like, the reason you have a career is because of these guys. So even if they're not as cooperative, what fun would that be? What would that be like in the media if everybody was buttoned up like Andre Drummond and sat on the sidelines and didn't, lash out or talk back or really bring any relevant thoughts, about amending and, adjusting the game as we move forward by just kind of sitting there and not saying anything? What good would that do the sport,
Mm-hmm. And hating the media is not like a new thing. Hating the media, that's not a new thing. I mean, right. Dennis Rodman was saying it in the 80s, or excuse me, the 90s, when they were interviewing him about, why he's doing weird things and he didn't want to talk to the media. And they say, why don't you want to talk to us? And he literally told them straight out, he's like, I'd play basketball for free, but I take all this money because of you people. Like, he's like, that's why they have to pay me. But he's like, I would literally play basketball for free, but I'm taking all this money, so I have to talk to you because I have to talk to you people.
And to the media's credit, they put Dennis Rodman in the Hall of Fame. And when you look at Dennis Rodman's career, he's only an All-Star twice. Maybe wouldn't have been a Hall of Famer if it weren't for some of his off-the-court antics, but they rewarded that because that
best
dude
rebounder of all time for his size. The best rebounder of all time for his size. The things that guy did at 6'9", he was out rebounding 7-footers on a nightly basis.
I think he led the league in rebounders for like 10 years in a row. So
yeah,
I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Insane rebounder.
Be a Hall of Famer on that merit alone. But it's
rebounds
nice
is an underrated stat.
True, especially back then when there were a lot bigger players and securing rebounds was harder because they weren't just uncontested rebounds with everybody running down the court
and defense, man. The guy could defend. The guy laid his whole ass on the court all the time. He was just an animal, and I think he's a guy that
it's nice to see him rewarded by being in the Hall of Fame because he's a guy who had his run-ins with the media, but by the same token, he grew the game of basketball because he was a pop culture phenomenon, and people outside of basketball knew who he was. There's jokes about him in like the movie Men in Black that has nothing to do with basketball, or he's got relations with North Korea. This guy's still years later in his career relevant because of some of the things he's done off the court. So to sit there and say, oh, his relationship with the media wasn't great, he's not a Hall of Famer. If anything, not only was his play terrific, but he did more for the game than a lot of guys who were buttoned up and quiet and respected the rules and respected the media, as sad as it is to say.
And because of, you brought up Marshawn Lynch, because of how he reacts to the media, his commercials that he does now make it even funnier, just because his personality now. He
Right.
never even wanted to talk to the media, and now he's showing up in, Subway commercials, rolling around in a giant tire and like stuff like that. It's crazy. And like, because of, he had that kind of stick it to the man. You brought up School of Rock earlier, the stick it to the man
Yeah.
mentality. I like, as a fan, we kind of like that because, everyone hates the media. like,
It
in
is
one
fun
way
to
or
hate the
another.
media, and they make it easy at times. But
And the media is so quick to call out players, but like, it's a big thing when a player calls out the media.
it's true.
They'll get
That's another
fined
double
for it.
standard. Harkening back to the owners versus athletes thing. How about athletes versus the media? The media is allowed to say horrible things, spread trade rumors that, even if they're not true, can be so damaging to a player's relationship with their teammates and the coaching staff and whatever else, that they end up becoming true
Yeah,
because
right.
that player gets in a
Speaking about
funk
trade
thinking they're going to be
rumors
traded. Yeah.
that are completely false, is they've been saying for the last like 2 weeks that the Bears are trying to give all this stuff away for Carson Wentz, and it comes out today after his trade that the Bears never actually even made an offer on Carson Wentz. They called, they got the price tag on Carson Wentz, and apparently never even put an offer forth. And the whole time the media's been blowing it out of proportion that we're offering all this stuff, and I've been like, God, no, do not give away multiple first-round picks for Carson Wentz.
Good
And
move
then
from
it
the
turns out
Bears.
today
This stuff,
that
man. They
that they
want this
never
to
even
happen more
offered.
than the involved parties. It's sad. It's sad to see the media's sway in sports. Like, they decide who the all-stars are. They decide, who gets to the Hall of Fame, and they control player movement. Like, I mean, shoot, we saw Giannis's offseason debacle. The ESPN wanted that guy to sign somewhere else so badly. They did everything in their power to spread rumors about him signing somewhere else, and he just wanted to stay loyal to the Bucks, who gave him a shot and took a chance on him late in the lottery the year he was drafted, when he was kind of a relatively unknown player playing in Greece. And he stayed loyal, and I think the media is upset by that, which is kind of really sad to see.
Yeah, and
It's nice
actually
to see him
he
still get
gained
voted
some
MVP.
respect. He gained
Yeah,
some respect in my book for doing that, not
I
going
think in the eyes of
somewhere.
the fans, definitely, but I think the
Yeah.
media is bummed that, man, this guy's boring. He never says anything rude. He's loyal to his team. He's exactly what we don't want. If you're in the business of 24-hour sports news, players like Giannis, if everyone in the league was like Giannis and was as good of a guy as he is, there would be no rumor mill. There would be no, 24-hour shows on ESPN talking about off-season moves in the middle of July when there's no basketball going on. So,
And
yeah,
he didn't do a LeBron either, and just, I'm going to stay here, but, all you other talented players, you come join me here. He didn't pull that
right.
crap
He didn't
either.
do
So,
that either. That's true.
but yeah,
But
so
you mentioned this Carson Wentz trade. What exactly did happen with that? He ended up going to Indianapolis, from my understanding.
right. And there's some confusing reports on it. Is the first report that came out said that they gave away, Indianapolis traded a third round pick and a conditional second round pick depending on how many games Carson Wentz starts for them this season.
75%. Carson Wentz has to play
Can you
75%
do
of the
that?
games.
Yes.
You
You
can.
can do that? That's
Mhm.
genius.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I
But
like
then
that. I don't
but
know that you can do
then
that in other sports. That's a
But then
genius idea.
the next report that I saw somewhere on, I don't even remember who I saw put it out, was saying that conditional pick is actually a first round pick. That if he plays more than 75% of the
Wow.
snaps, or if Indianapolis makes the playoffs, that it's going to be a first round pick.
How do you
Yeah.
guys feel about these kinds of incentives? Like, sometimes these incentives are misleading. Like, do you want, like, it kind of makes you wonder, like, if they're going to throw this guy out there if he is hurt, just so that they can, you know what I mean? Or they're,
Mhm.
it could affect the future of this man's career. Like,
Right.
trying
No,
to
I
meet these
I like the
requirements.
incentive thing only because it gives the player more incentive to do well. The thing that I don't like about it is going back to the GM talk actually again is when the GM purposely then tries to hurt the guy's career so he doesn't have to pay up the more incentive. If something like that happens, I lose a lot of respect for the GM. But from the player's perspective, there's a lot of that money-based incentive in the league, or like a defensive end. If they put up this many sacks, they get paid extra. If they play this many snaps, they get paid extra. I like that because it gives them more incentive to do well. And even if they're not on a team that's winning a bunch of games, they're still putting their best game forward all the time. So I like that.
I mean, it's good and bad. I definitely see what you're saying, but for instance, if you were, a hockey player and you had to launch X amount of shots a game to get a bonus,
Mhm.
is that good for your team if you're taking bad shots to
See,
meet that
I don't
contract
think I
incentive?
don't think
Yeah,
stuff like that should be
yeah.
incentivized. I think playing games is only because there's players that are hurt all the
Sure.
time type of players like a
But
Jimmy Garoppolo. If you gave
what if
him
you really are hurt and they put you out there to meet that
right, but
incentive
that's
and
the
it
whole point in
aggravates the
the
injury worse? That's
but
not good
that's
anymore
that's
for
the whole
you.
point of the incentive, right? It's like if you were to sign Jimmy Garoppolo, I might want to pay Jimmy Garoppolo $2 million, low ball him. But if you play all the games, sure, I'll give you another 10 million. But the likelihood of that happening for my franchise is low because he always gets hurt. So why would I want to guarantee him 15 million when he's likely going to get hurt, and then I'm paying him for being hurt? I think that's why
Well,
the
and you
incentive
could
is
pay
important.
him to get hurt worse because if you're paying him to play more games, he might play through an injury that he really should be sitting out. And then you go, wait, I just paid this guy more money to play more games in one season where we really didn't have a shot to win at
Mhm.
all. And then the rest of the years on his contract are null and void and useless because now he has a career ending injury because he played through an injury that he could have rehabbed by just not trying to
Yeah, and
meet
you
that
would
game
you would hope
schedule.
things like that wouldn't happen. But I mean, I'm
Yeah,
sure that they do, but you would hope
right.
from a fan standpoint
Just
that
playing
the
devil's
organization is
advocate.
treating a player
Yeah.
well enough that if he's hurt or can't go, that the training staff would say he's hurt bad enough where he should not play, and that the coaches
Yeah.
and the staff would respect that. But yeah,
Rich,
going
what do you think?
So my thing is,
Damn, I was hoping he
Eagles
wasn't there. Just
are
trying to catch him slacking.
they literally yeah, get the hell out of here. This is
Rich, do
like
your
my
typical,
topic for
do
sure.
your typical, and just say you don't know, and we'll move on. Okay.
Yeah. Rich, do
Nah,
you know the player's name we're talking
fuck you
about, or
guys
do you need
both.
a refresh?
Carson Wentz, Eagles. Eagles just got like this was like a bear-esque move right here. Like, let's get rid of our one of our best players for like a fucking garbage can right now. Like that second giving
Oh,
up Carson Wentz for that second, third round pick, pretty much. If you think about it, 75% of the games, if Carson Wentz misses 4 games throughout the season, Eagles do not get that first round pick where Carson Wentz has a history of injuries going back to the owners and athletes. What kind of stops the owner from Colts are a pretty good team. We can still make the playoffs if we drop 4 games. Like, if you want to handle it kind of that way to keep that first round pick, like, how do you prove that a player wasn't hurt to not go out on the field to play as well?
Yeah, I think that'd be hard to
So,
prove.
yeah,
And that goes
exactly.
back to, as a fan, I would hope
Yeah,
that they
they
wouldn't
don't
do that.
do
But I'm
that.
sure things like that
Yeah,
happen all the time, and that they don't want to pay out an incentive, whether it's money or draft picks like
yeah.
that. So,
okay.
but no, I think in general, I think straight out, I think the Colts probably won that trade. I mean, as a Bears fan, I was really not liking that we kept being in
You
the
all kind of
conversation
were in
for
agreement on
Carson
Oh,
that.
Wentz. I was
Yeah.
so
like,
happy. So happy that
like
didn't happen.
he's injured sometimes. Since playing in that Super Bowl, he hasn't looked great, and I know they've had all kinds of stuff going on that team, but injuries and whatnot. But I was not wanting him as much. And when they were talking about a first round pick or more, I was like, he's not worth that for a guy that they've essentially benched at this point and said that they're moving on. why would teams give up a first round pick for a team, like a guy that the team doesn't even want, and he's said that he will not play there. So, I think that definitely hurt his like trade value for that team. But that being said, if the Bears would have like gotten him for a third, I don't know if I would have been like upset with that, only because like if he can still play, a third round pick is probably okay to give up. But
That's nothing. Yeah, if
yeah.
he can still
So
play
like,
at the
yeah.
end.
So I think that would have been more of a risk reward type thing that they would have maybe came out on top. That's why I think for the Colts, I think they really won that trade, because a third round pick or whatever it may be, it's like if the guy can play, then you just got to steal essentially quarterback that has proven that he can do it to like with the right points around him. And the Colts have one of the best offensive lines in the game. And that's really when Carson
That's
Wentz
true. That'll
performed
help his
well,
health for
is
sure.
when he had a good offensive line and a good defense. Well, that's exactly what the Colts have right now.
That's
That's
a
true.
great fit.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. That not only will that be good for his actual statistical production, but it might be one of the few teams where he won't run as high a risk of re-injuring himself because he's got such a good offensive line. The quarterback protection is so good that he's not as likely to get blindsided by someone and get injured. But Rich, how are we doing on time?
Oh, dude, time's doing well. I want to talk more crap and more shit about the stupid Eagles and how this whole thing like unfolded. Eagles win like one Super Bowl. Now you have the owner and GM thinking they are like the hot shit, even though they did not do a whole lot. Where getting rid of Carson Wentz, why did you fire Doug Peterson then? That makes no sense because Doug Peterson's the one who wanted to play Jalen Hurts. He is the one that, through reports and everything, has said, like, to play Jalen Hurts over Wentz. So now you fire one of your best coaches for the Eagles franchise because he won their only Super Bowl. You run the head coach out of town, and then you run out the starting quarterback that head coach didn't even want. So what was the point of getting rid of your head coach as well if you were going to get rid of Wentz as well? Like
I
I
think
thought.
I think the whole point in that, Rich, is just they've admitted now that they're gonna do a rebuild and they're pretty much starting over fresh. So they wanted to get a new coach. They have a new quarterback. They're gonna probably draft a wide receiver pretty high. That's my prediction anyway. So it'll be, they'll probably cut Alshon Jeffrey and stuff like that. So I think the team is going to look almost brand new next year, and I think they didn't want to go forward with a new team with the old head coach, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that does make a little bit of sense, but at the same time,
I'm with
like
Rich.
with that like end of the year like debacle they kind of had with like starting the third string quarterback, I don't think that was a Doug Peterson decision. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that was an owner GM decision to get that better draft pick, and they told Doug Peterson to do that,
Sure.
where as being the head coach, you get all the flack for it. Because even when he talked about it, he felt uncomfortable. He seemed uncomfortable. Like, well, we just wanted to kind of see what like we had with third string, knowing like damn well that guy's never gonna touch the field like ever again.
Yeah.
Like,
No. Yeah. I don't think the organization is going anywhere far anytime soon. That's my opinion. I think they've definitely taken a pretty big step back there with everything that went on last season. People still had pretty high hopes for them going into the season last year. People thought they might even win the division. I didn't think so.
It doesn't
And
take much to win that division,
yeah,
though.
that's the thing, is
That's
like
the other
people.
thing that's really frustrating
Yeah.
is like, when are they going to do away with the divisions? Rich, add that to the podcast sheet right now. You heard it here first. I want to talk about how flawed that is in sports, where just because you win a division, you get a playoff spot. That's the biggest bullshit ever. And
dude, the worst is the
I could
home
have an entire
field.
podcast on just that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Divisions are like, I feel like total hot garbage for a freaking like playoff spot because like most of the time like that team might beat someone in the wild card, but after the wild card, it's just like, yeah, dude, they're getting rocked and they're getting rolled.
Well, there might be
Like,
a team that just has a better chance and just belongs there. They've been better.
yeah,
Like some teams might have two wild card worthy, teams, and they're not going to make the playoffs at all, or they won't have home field advantage or whatever else. It's just, yeah, I don't know. It's frustrating in all
yeah.
sports to see.
Yeah, so it looks like we're running down on time here. So we'll end this with a 2-minute drill for Austin, which is essentially Austin has to answer 8 questions in 2 minutes or less. And if he gets through all 8,
8?
yep, 8. So you have 15 seconds, short and sweet. And if you
Oh,
get through
God.
all 8, then you get something.
Wins the beer.
Last time it
Wins
was a
the beer.
beer, and he did not
I
get a
hope
beer.
I hope some of these are true or false questions.
Oh, yeah, you're gonna keep hoping then.
All right. Let's rock and roll.
All right, Rich, can we get a countdown?
Yep, as soon as you start the question, countdown's gonna start.
Okay, Austin, here we go. Who is going to win the NBA Coach of the Year?
That's a great question. I think it's going to go to Quinn Snyder in Utah. Look at that team. They got knocked out in the first round last year, but they've had potential for a long time. Donovan Mitchell's still really young. Rudy Gobert still fairly young. They're currently at the top of the standings in the West, and even if they lose that holding, I just think he's due for a Coach of the Year. He's doing a lot with a relatively young team that's not loaded with star-studded household names that and I think he deserves it.
Okay, who's going to win the Defensive Player of the Year in the NBA?
That's got to be Ben Simmons. I think he's really taken a leap forward on the defensive end. You saw him guarding Damian Lillard down the stretch the other night. They say that about a lot of players that they can guard all 5 positions. I really think Ben Simmons can. And in addition to that, his statistics in terms of like steals and blocks and help side defense are really good too. I think he wins it this year.
Okay, in the NBA, which playoff team from last year will not make the playoffs this year, and which one will make it in their place?
Oh, the Orlando Magic, I think, are already screwed. That's a cheap shot because they barely made it last year anyway. Probably didn't decide to be or didn't belong there. But yeah, I think the Magic are out. And as far as who's in, let's just say the Bulls.
I like that. Okay, switching gears here a little bit. Where will J.J. Watt end up going?
I think he reunites with DeAndre Hopkins. He's definitely campaigned for him a bit. I could see him going to the Cardinals.
Okay. Who will be the Bears quarterback in 2021?
Derek Carr, please. I don't know if he's gone anywhere yet, but that's my pick. Anyway.
And what position will the Bears draft in 2021 draft? First round.
Oh, God.
Or do they trade out?
I have no idea. I say they trade up and take a quarterback that's really bad.
Okay, and last question: who wins the NHL?
Time is up.
Ooh,
Damn.
sorry. I will take the blame on that. I was slow on that question because I didn't know how I was going to phrase
Man,
it.
I did pretty
who
good
wins the
there.
NHL? I meant to say who will win the Stanley Cup.
I don't think I would have
Well,
answered it in time
I-
anyway, but I
I
knew
will-
what you meant. And I don't know. I have no idea. So I would have lost anyway. I probably would have panicked. It would have taken me a second to
Okay,
answer.
do you want to phone a friend and
have
phone
nothing.
Rich in?
Rich, who do you think? Who you got in the NHL? Rich.
Oh,
Rich.
dude, isn't like Vegas good or something?
Yeah, there you go.
They're
Vegas
not
is
bad.
good
They're
or
not bad.
something.
Yeah.
Let's go with that.
Can I be
Go
hopeful and
Vegas.
say the Blackhawks?
No chance. Not
Ah,
a chance in hell.
man.
Hey,
you could try.
they've been decent lately. They go to overtime more
Yeah.
times than they don't go to overtime. But
Yeah, the old
That's more
Canadian try,
points.
as they call it. You get a
Yeah.
point for losing. Love to see it.
I love that, actually. It gives you more
I-
incentive to
honestly,
go to overtime.
it's sort of
but
a participation trophy-esque thing, but
yeah,
it
I
is
don't
kind of
know.
cool.
There's people that love it or hate it, but I kind of like it in a
It
way.
does
'Cause
incentivize you to not just give up because you're
right,
trash.
and it pays off for losing close games in a way,
Right,
or
right.
and it's like you were at least close, so you get something. Whether like in other leagues, it's like if you lose in overtime, that's just as well as
Kind
getting
of
blown
forces
out,
you to full on tank though,
right?
because if
Yeah,
you're just trying to lose games and you're accidentally getting to overtime in some of them because you want your team to compete, I guess it could potentially hurt you, but I don't know.
right. So that was Austin's fail at the 2-minute drill. So I
You
guess
helped
I'll
me
drink his
fail.
beer. I'll drink his beer,
Wow,
or
so
Rich will drink it,
generous.
and
Dude,
we'll
I'll
move on with our lives.
shotgun a beer before I go to bed tonight.
All right.
For Austin's lack of
You're gonna
You
answering
need a
questions.
you
you're
need
gonna
a cool
shotgun
down
a beer
beer.
in the
Are you
shower.
gonna Aaron Rodgers
Yeah.
chug a beer? And by that I mean drink 2 sips and then set it down and go to bed.
No, I know how to shotgun a beer and drink a beer.
I know
That's
you do,
Ooh.
one
Rich.
thing I'm pretty solid at.
Yeah,
That's one thing you and I have done together. like I
actually,
said.
Rich, for being over 40 now, he
Dude, fuck
still
you.
drinks a good beer every once in a while.
Dude, that's
Who's
some
older,
bullshit.
Rich or Tom Brady? That would have been a good
Yeah.
2-minute drill question.
Dude, that's a lot of like hatred
Ooh,
coming up.
or
Yeah. Should we
throw
wrap this
another
up before it gets
throw
out of
another
hand?
name out there: Rich, Betty White, or Tom Brady.
Dude,
Ooh,
really?
They're
I
pretty
don't
close.
know. Betty White
Dude,
looks good for her age. Rich
dude, that's some
Yeah,
a
Rich
bullshit.
has
little
definitely tailed off in the last
falling
couple of
apart a little
years.
bit. Yeah, he's still
That's
cute, but
that's probably why
uh,
he's settling down
yeah.
now. He's like, wow, I still have some of
Yeah.
my looks. I better settle down quickly.
Yeah, Maria
I don't know
proposed to
about
him, I
quickly,
heard. She
but it's
was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
happening.
it's
yeah.
now or never, bud. He was like, all
Well,
right.
Austin did start this by saying our girlfriends might be watching. I really hope my girlfriend and my wife will watch it because that'll
Yeah, I
be
guess
good for
that's
me.
true. You guys don't have girlfriends, you have
Rich,
fiancés.
his
That's right.
girlfriend and
Man.
his fiance may be watching as well.
Oh
That's
man.
true.
Dude, don't be trying
Yeah,
to get me in
Rich.
trouble, man.